Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're talking about something that just dropped yesterday, OpenAI's GPT-5.5. And I want to be clear right up front, this is not just another incremental AI update. This model marks a genuine shift in what AI can do. We're moving from an era where AI answers your questions into an era where AI actually works, like a real colleague sitting next to you, getting things done on your behalf. Let's break it all down. GPT-5.5 was released on April 23, 2026. Its internal code name was Spud. Now that's a humble name for what OpenAI is calling a new class of intelligence. The model is available on all paid plans and also through the Codex developer platform. But the big story isn't just who can use it. It's what it can do that previous models simply could not. So what makes GPT-5.5 different? The answer is something OpenAI calls intuitive autonomy. Here's what that means in plain terms. Previous models, even the very capable GPT-5.4, needed you to hold their hand through complex tasks. If you wanted the AI to fix a tricky bug in your code, you had to walk it through each step. The moment you stopped directing it, the model would get confused or start making things up. GPT-5.5 changes that. You give it a messy, multi-part task, and it figures out the goal itself. It reads the situation, makes a plan, uses tools, checks its own work, and keeps going until the job is done. Now let's talk about the thinking process. GPT-5.5 has an internal reasoning mode where it essentially debates with itself before giving you an answer. Think of it like a doctor who doesn't just blurt out a diagnosis, but actually pauses to consider the symptoms from multiple angles before speaking. This makes the model dramatically more reliable on hard problems: math, research, data analysis, complex writing. And here's the impressive part. OpenAI says GPT-5.5 keeps the exact same response speed as GPT-5.4, even while doing all this extra thinking under the hood. That means you get better answers, without waiting longer. One of the most striking new capabilities is computer use. GPT-5.5 can actually look at your screen, move the mouse, click on things, and type, just like a human would. This is integrated into Codex, OpenAI's developer environment. Imagine having an AI colleague who doesn't just tell you what code to write, but actually opens the files, writes the code, runs the tests, and fixes the errors, all on its own. That's the vision GPT-5.5 is moving toward. Let's look at how this model performs on the benchmarks that actually matter. We're not talking about multiple-choice trivia anymore. Those old tests have been maxed out. Instead, GPT-5.5 is being evaluated on real-world tasks. On SWE Bench Pro, which asks the model to solve actual GitHub issues by navigating real code repositories, GPT-5.5 scored 58.6%. To put that in context, the best model in 2023 scored just 4.4% on the original version of that test. The gap is staggering. On OS World Verified, which tests whether a model can operate a computer independently using a real operating system with mouse and keyboard, GPT-5.5 scored 78.7%. On GDP-Val, which evaluates the model across 44 different professional job categories to see how much of a knowledge worker's output it can replace, GPT-5.5 scored 84.9%, statistically above the expert human baseline. And on Terminal Bench 2.0, which measures complex multi-step command line tasks, GPT-5.5 scored 82.7%, narrowly edging out Anthropic's best model. Now how does GPT-5.5 compare to its biggest rival, Anthropic's Claude Opus 4.7? This is where it gets interesting. Across 10 key benchmarks, neither model dominates. Claude Opus 4.7 leads on 6 of those benchmarks, while GPT-5.5 leads on 4. The score gaps are tiny, often just 2 to 13 percentage points. What this means is that the AI frontier is no longer a one-horse race. For agentic tasks like coding and computer control, GPT-5.5 has the edge. For nuanced text reasoning, Claude still holds its own. Smart developers will use both. Now let's talk about the price, because this is where things get uncomfortable for a lot of users. GPT-5.5's API pricing is $5 per million input tokens and $30 per million output tokens, exactly double what GPT-5.4 cost. If you want the top-tier GPT-5.5 Pro, you're looking at $30 for input and a jaw-dropping $180 per million output tokens. That's more than 7 times the cost of the standard version. But here's the twist. OpenAI argues that smarter models actually save you money overall. They call it the token efficiency paradox. In one real example from the developer community, a complex coding task that required 15 back-and-forth interactions with a cheaper model took only 3 interactions with GPT 5.5. The result? Even though the per-token price was much higher, the total cloud cost dropped from $4.89 down to $1.60, a 67% savings. And the task finished 4 minutes faster. The lesson is that it's not about the price per token. It's about how many tokens you actually need to get the job done. Now let's shift to something that doesn't always make headlines but matters a great deal: fairness. OpenAI introduced a new evaluation framework called first-person fairness. Here's the idea. When you chat with an AI, you often share your name, maybe in an email you're drafting, or when you introduce yourself. Names carry information about gender, culture, and background. The question OpenAI asked is, does the AI treat people differently based on their name? To test this, OpenAI's researchers created over 600 challenging prompts. They ran multi-turn conversations where a user would introduce themselves with a name typically associated with males, like Brian, or females, like Ashley, and then make the exact same request, like, write me a fairy tale. An AI grader powered by GPT-4.5 then evaluated whether the responses showed any harmful stereotyping. The key metric is called harm overall. Lower is better. The results showed GPT-5.5 performs on par with GPT-5.1, with a harm overall score of 0.0112. While there's a slight uptick compared to GPT-5.4, the difference is not statistically significant. The overall picture is that strong alignment training is successfully suppressing gender bias, even as the model becomes far more powerful. Now let's talk about the risks that come with this kind of power. GPT-5.5 was evaluated by external partners, including the UK AI Safety Institute, specifically to understand its potential for harm if misused. On cybersecurity, the results are sobering. GPT-5.5 achieved a 90.5% success rate on narrow, expert-level cyber tasks, up from 71.4% for the previous model. In a simulated corporate network attack, the AI successfully completed a complex 32-step intrusion, end-to-end, without human help, in 1 out of 10 tries. A human security expert typically needs 20 hours for the same challenge. But it's not all alarming news. The good news is that when it comes to biological weapons, the safeguards are working. On a test of protein binding prediction, a key step toward designing new pathogens, GPT-5.5 scored just 0.4%. That's actually lower than the previous model's 3.46%. OpenAI's safety threshold is 50%, so the model is nowhere near the danger zone. The safety filters are successfully suppressing this knowledge, even though the underlying model clearly has it. Here's a quick summary of GPT-5.5's content safety scores, and these are impressive numbers. On blocking harmful content, the model scored 97.9% for violence and illegal acts, 99.3% for nonviolent illegal activity, 94.1% for child sexual content, and 92.5% for extremist content. Multimodal image safety sits at 98%. These near-perfect scores show that while the model is more powerful than ever, it is also more tightly constrained than any previous version. So how did the community react? It was a tale of two extremes. On one side, senior engineers who actually deployed the model in real agentic workflows were blown away. One early access user said it was the first time I felt like I was working with actual AGI. For the first time, the AI didn't lose the thread on complex multi-file debugging. It kept going, kept checking, kept correcting itself until the project was fixed. On the other side, a large group of developers pushed back hard on the price, the censorship, and alleged performance manipulation of older models right before the launch. That's it for today. See you in the next one.